For the past several days, I've been covering current events fulfilling end time prophecies. And today is going to be another presentation. But before I get into this, a foundation of importance needs to be laid. And there are cynics, scoffers, and mockers out there that are still sending me information. I should not be speaking about politics. Don't talk about current events. Don't talk about news reports. For the past several days, this has heightened their berating of yours truly. I've been covering the pandemic treaty about to be signed, the signing of the international health regulations at the UN and also at the WHO, respectively. And today we're going to be addressing another pact, a summit, which is about to take place in September at the United Nations. Now, I want to be very clear to those professed SDAs who are talking about, don't talk about politics, don't talk about news, don't talk about current events. If you are saying this and yet profess to be an SDA, you are ignorant, you are deceived. And by God's grace, I'm going to make sure you don't deceive those who are vulnerable. Because what I'm about to say is going to be efficacious, is going to be a nail in a sure place. Beloved, the very foundation of the SDA movement is the prophecy of Daniel chapter 8 and verse 14, the 2,300 days prophecy, which began in the year 457 BC and came to an end October 22nd, 1844. There was something important, and that was a day represents a year in Bible prophecies, which prophecy confirmed chiefly a day represents a year to those Adventists living between the years of 1833 through 1844. It was the prophecies of Revelation 8 and Revelation 9. We're talking about specifically the trumpets. And when you look at the sixth trumpet, the second woe, it speaks about the nations at war. And there was a particular nation, and that nation was Turkey. And we're told that there was an Adventist preacher by the name of Josiah Litch. He was studying the prophecies of chapter 8 and 9 of Revelation, and he saw October 11, 1840. Yes, Turkey, Islam would surrender its power. In Constantinople, it would be broken. And that was the day for a year prophecy. In Revelation chapter 9, the sixth trumpet and the second woe. Question, did that prophecy come to pass? Yes, it did. And that was what confirmed a day for a year prophecy and principle. That was what confirmed the 2,300 days of chapter 8 of Daniel and verse 14 would come to pass October 22nd, 1844. They had the actual correct date, but the wrong event, expecting the second coming of Christ. But Christ moved from the holy place to the most holy place of the heavenly sanctuary. What if Josiah Litch was not studying the prophecies? And what if he was not watching the current events? What if he was not engaged in politics, watching the political arena? He would have missed the fulfillment of that prophecy. He would not have been used by God to awaken the other Adventist to the great event, October 22nd, 1844. Listen attentively. In the book Great Controversy, the chapter entitled An American Reformer, page 334 and 335. I'll begin on page 335. It says, at the very time specified, Turkey, through her ambassadors, accepted the protection of the Allied powers of Europe and thus place herself under the control of Christian nations, August 11, 1840. When it became known, multitudes were convinced of the correctness of the principles of prophetic interpretation adopted by William Miller and his associates, and a wonderful impetus was given to the Advent movement. Men of learning and position united with Miller, both in preaching and in publishing his views. And from 1840 to 1844, the work rapidly extended. They preached and they published. We must teach, preach, and publish this in stationary media press and the digital media press, social media, websites. Think about that, friends. So what were they looking at to see the fulfillment of that prophecy? It was current events. What current events? It was politics. They were mingling in politics, but they were watching political events. Turkey, through her ambassadors, surrendered to the powers of Europe, the Christian nations. Today, how would that be done? Would that be done just simply verbally, or would it be a document written and signed? Talk to me. Would it be a signed document among nations? Yes. To fulfill that prophecy. What have I been talking about? The signing of the pandemic treaty among nations, the signing of the international health regulations at the WHO and the UN. What will we be talking about today? Another compact, another signing of documents. Yet these scoffers and cynics are saying, don't talk about current events, don't talk about political events and reports. They are deceived, ignorant, and by God's grace, I'm warning you, the flock. Stay clear from those preachers, those outside of the SDA movement. Stay clear of those preachers, those within the conference of SDA. Stay clear of those preachers, those who claim to be self-supporting, independent of the SDA organized churches. Well, the stage has been set. Let's keep our eyes vigilant on these current events. Today, I have a special guest, Marie Diaz. Her works can be seen here on the platform. The playlist is there, Eyes on the Times. Without further ado, Marie, what's on your radar?
Well, Pastor, as you rightly stated, there are so many things that are happening on the global scale. And today, I think we're going to dive in to see how those things are going to impact all of God's people. And particularly, as you mentioned, the Summit for the Future, and how, as you rightly stated, is another treaty, another pact among the nations, and how this is laying the foundation for a new world order.
It's clear. In the actual DNA of the Advent movement leading up to October 22nd, 1844, and beyond, for the Seventh-day Adventist in our DNA is watching current events, fulfilling prophecies, signing of treaties. Let's get right into it. Friends, by God's grace, you're not going to be deceived if you're sincere and you're on this platform. Safe to Serve International, please be alert. First-time viewers, be watchful and vigilant. So now, we have the UN Secretary, Antonio Guterres. What is he up to?
Well, he just recently released a new video in which he discussed some of the events that are going to be taking place in September and how this Summit of the Future is going to address certain crises. And so I believe you have this video, and we can discuss it a little bit more once we view the video.
Let's roll it. Here he is.
Sustainable Development Goals and the hopes and dreams of people around the world hang in the balance. Now is the time to accelerate and scale up investments in the SDGs. Now is the time to tackle the climate crisis and anchor economies in renewable energy and green solutions. And now is the time to reform and rebalance critical global systems and institutions, from the United Nations Security Council to the global financial architecture. this September summit of the future will be a moment for the world to come together and share solutions to shape a better, more peaceful and prosperous future.
Your thoughts?
I think we should talk about some of the points that he mentioned in this video and the purpose for the Summit of the Future. If you paid close attention, he said that they are going to address the climate crisis, and they also want to reform certain institutions, right? They want to reform the global system, of which he specifically mentioned the United Nations, as well as the financial architecture. To put it in layman's terms, the financial architecture is really, he's calling for a new economic order. And so, again, these are just some of the points that they want to profound effects on God's people and people around the world.
You know, when we hear the word reform, they want to reform the actual nations, their policies that govern them. These words should alert us for what will transpire in the last days. They want to reform. As we see them speaking about reform, it's time for God's people to seek revival and reformation. You heard him say it's a summit. When you think of a summit, and this is all linked to Babylon, my mind goes back to the Tower of Babel. Tower, apex, summit. And remember, Antonio Gutierrez is actually Jesuit educated, Jesuit trained. And I covered that as soon as he was inaugurated as the General Secretary of the United Nations. He's on the same team with the great puppet master, the Pope of Rome. Here he is.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is a pleasure to be here in Munich again. As the title of our discussion implies, today's global order is not working for everyone. In fact, I would go further and say it's not working for anyone.
Thoughts?
I mean, he said essentially that the global order as we have it isn't working. And so the logical train of thought then is that if it's not currently working, we need to establish or reestablish a new world order. And this is why this presentation is so startling and so important for us to address.
And remember, this man is Jesuit trained and educated. The Jesuits. And one reason of many reasons why the founders of America fled from the old world. They were fleeing from Jesuit tyranny, Jesuit oppression. Stay with me here. And here we have a Jesuit leader, trained, educated, sitting over all the nations. And America is planning to sign and be a part of this summit, accord, and pact. It means then America is going backward, back into tyranny, slavery.
Excellencies, if countries fulfill their obligations under the UN Charter and international law, every person on earth would live in peace and dignity.
Marie.
That's startling, right? He's saying that if we establish a new global order or a new world order, that we will be able to have peace, right? And what does the Bible say? You know, when they shall say peace and safety, then sudden destruction. So I hope that your viewers are able to see how important this is and, you know, the language that they're using. And, you know, I think they ought to also bear in mind that the Pope has often talked about the need for peace as well. So let us, you know, hone in on what they're saying and really try to interpret and dig a little further into what they're saying when they mention these terms.
And this has become a phrase being thrown around recently. It was once a taboo term, New World Order, but all of a sudden it has become commonplace. As Christians, we take nothing for granted. For in the Bible, it speaks about God's order. We should not view this only from a political arena, New World Order, because everything leads us back to the scriptures. Does God have an order in his government? Yes. So what is the new world order? Is to counter God's order. This is the great controversy. And God's order is found in Isaiah chapter 9, verse 6 and verse 7. God's government has an order. God's government has an order. And God's government, his order, he carries it on his shoulder. And what did the priests bring on their shoulders? It was the Ark of the Covenant. And what was in the Ark of the Covenant? The principal item, the 10 Commandments. And what is the controversy about and over between Christ and Satan? It's over worship. Matthew chapter 4, verse 8 through verse 10. So to all of you viewers, and Safe to Serve International, this so-called New World Order will ultimately lead to false worship. Next clip.
The new agenda for peace to be discussed at the Summit of the Future in September aims to update our collective security systems based on a more networked and inclusive multilateralism for a world in transition. From reform of the UN Security Council to a recommitment to eliminating nuclear weapons and the role of sustainable development and climate action in preventing conflict, the new agenda for peace seeks to update global commitments for the challenges of today and tomorrow.
Marie.
If you could just continue rolling, there's one more point on the next clip that ties into this.
And we need a new Bretton Woods movement to reform the global financial architecture so that it corresponds to today's global economy and is able to create a true global safety net, in particular for developing countries drowning in debt. The Summit of the Future will consider the need for deep reforms to make these institutions and frameworks truly universal and inclusive and based in the rule of law. This is essential to create a global economy that works for everyone, everywhere. Excellencies, finally, we must end our war with nature.
Marie.
Right. So the reason why I wanted to continue playing the clip is because he made mention of a particular term that I want the audience to pay attention to. He said that we need to establish a new Bretton Woods system. And for those of you that aren't familiar with what that terminology means, I'm just going to give you just a real brief synopsis of what the Bretton Woods system is. First of all, it was the first global monetary system that was established in 1944, I believe it was, and it was immediately after World War II. And what ended up happening is that they had 44 delegates from different countries around the world, and they met in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire. That's where the name comes from. And what they decided was they established this new financial system. And the financial system was in order for the nations to be able to exchange currencies among themselves, they were going to use the US dollar to be able to exchange their currencies. And the currency then was pegged to gold. In 1971, I believe it is, Nixon actually removed us or took us off of the gold standard. And this is why you see a prevalency of the US dollar in the economic system, and also why even today, the US dollar is the currency reserve. And so this is important because we're not conjecturing when we're discussing these points. He's clearly saying verbatim that they need to establish a new Bretton Woods system. And so this is why we're saying when they're calling for this Summit of the Future and they're mentioning we need a new global order, we need a new Bretton Woods system or a new economic order, this is what they're saying. They're saying get rid of the current system and establish a new one.
And I wonder, what would that new one entail? Talk to us.
Well, obviously, it's based on Revelations 13, a system in which we will not, those of us who are true to God, will not be able to buy and sell. And I mean, I think we know that it's going to be a digital system. We already see this taking place, right? This is why CBDCs is such a big deal right now. All of the nations are starting to implement or establish the framework for a digital system. And again, the timing of this it's impeccable. It's amazing. As you rightly mentioned in your intro, they've already established a pact where the World Health Organization is on board. Now we're going to the United Nations, right?
Correct.
And that's the World Health Organization. That's from a health perspective. Now we have the system in which they're bringing the nations together, where they're having one mind. And this again brings us back to Revelation. So brothers and sisters, I hope you're seeing the significance of what we're presenting today.
And it's not accidental in 1 Timothy chapter 6 and verse 10, where it says the love of money is the root of all evil. So when they're calling for a new world order, a new political order, and a new economic order, we know exactly what time it is. Because at the base of all tyranny is the financial sector. Again, the foundation of all tyranny, they must control buying, selling, trading, commerce is the economic structure. Hence, a central bank, digital currency. Everything is digital. Are we ready for the new world order? By the way, let me allow them to say it.
Excellencies, it is clear that our world is in deep trouble. Global governance in its present form is entrenching divisions and fueling discontent. We must work based on justice with renewed urgency and solidarity. There is always an opportunity to create a more inclusive, comprehensive, and effective global order that works for everyone based on international law. A safer world and a bigger pie for all. That is the objective of the UN Summit of the Future in September.
Marie.
He spelled it out in plain language. Unfortunately, for some people, they will look at this clip and they won't understand the significance of what he just said. He said that we can establish peace if the international order comes together. We sign this pact for the future, establish a new economic order, reform the UN. And not only that, he also mentioned earlier in the clip that we can also address the climate crisis. And so do we see how everything is kind of converging and coming together? And essentially what they're saying with this new plan, they can eradicate all of the evils that are taking place in the world today. And so, and going back to what you just said, Pastor, about, a while back, they mentioned that, are you ready for a new world order? We heard that, just a year ago, maybe. And I think some of us may have brushed that under the carpet and didn't give it much thought. But we're seeing how what they said is now coming to pass.
Well, let's roll it.
And it's not about...
Here it is.
And it's not about the U.S. versus China. It's about what underpins a world order is always the financial system. Of how very important the financial structure is to absolutely everything else. And what we're seeing in the world today, I think, is we are on the brink of a dramatic change where we are about to, and I'll say this boldly, we're about to abandon the traditional system of money and accounting and introduce a new one. And the new one, the new accounting, is what we call blockchain. It means digital. It means having a almost perfect record of every single transaction that happens in the economy, which will give us far greater clarity over what's going on. It also raises huge dangers in terms of the balance of power between states and citizens. In my opinion, we're going to need a digital constitution of human rights if we're going to have digital money.
The signs are here. Imagine if I were sitting in that meeting, what would I be thinking when I see these signs? Here are the words at the same summit.
And the title of this session, are we ready for a new world order?
Marie.
So again, she just said the financial system underpins the world order, right? And, of course, they're throwing around some nuances, global order, new world order. It's all the same thing, right? And so the fact that the Security General, Antonio Gutierrez, is saying that at this summit, we need to establish a new global order and financial system, it just, all of these things, they line up with each other. And so I don't know about you, but this is fearful in my mind to think that, we're on the precipice of them essentially establishing what the Bible had prophesied thousands of years ago was going to take place. And one other point she mentioned is that, everything is going to be digital. They're going to be able to look at all of our transaction, right? And this is going to give the papal power, the beast, right, the power that it needs to be able to control not only men, but the consciences of men. And so, brothers and sisters, prophecy is literally being fulfilled before our very eyes.
It's also worthy to add. I want to speak especially to those of you who believe in the scriptures. And for those of you who don't believe it, I pray you will, because what is now being transpired have been prophesied in the word. On August 11, 1840, that was not the first meeting that led to Turkey surrendering to the Christian nations that fulfilled the prophecy of Revelation 9, 6th trumpet, second woe. That was not the first meeting. Listen to me attentively. They must have had several meetings leading up to August 11, 1840. So while we're talking about what's coming in September and these present and current meetings, you need to understand the roadmap is leading to the fulfillment of prophecy. And that's why we must be vigilant at every mile marker, every mile post along the road, along the path. So we are not taken by surprise. It's all about controlling the funds, the economy. In Matthew chapter 4, the last temptation of Satan to Christ, he said, look at the kingdoms and the glory of them. All these things will I give unto you if you fall down and worship me. 2 points. That means Satan controlled the kingdoms and controlled the monetary system. Think about that. So how will we know we're living in the last days? When the kingdoms are coming together and being controlled by the puppet master. And now they're going to say, if you don't go along with our agenda, you can't buy nor can you sell. So when Antonio Gutierrez said, we want an economy that works for all, you need to understand the all has an asterisk, only for those who go along with their agenda. Do you remember the pandemic? You'll be able to travel and trade for everyone only if you go along with the jab. Only if you go along with our other policies. You can't travel, you can't buy, you cannot sell. Shut down your businesses. Who else, Marie, will be attending this meeting in September or planning to attend the Summit for the Future at the UN? Talk to us.
I just briefly want to say that, what you just mentioned was significant in and of itself. The individual that we're going to mention that's coming or may potentially come to this summit, just intensifies everything that we've already discussed. And so the Pope himself has been invited to come to this Summit of the Future. And for those of you that don't know it, the last time that the Pope has addressed the United Nations was back in 2015.
Yes.
So there has been a significant lapse in time. And I just want to say, when we're going to watch the video, but I kind of wonder if, because when you watch the video, he's saying, I'm not sure, if I'm coming, there's a very good possibility that I may come. And the reason why I think, and this is just my own assumption, is because perhaps he was looking at what was going to take place with the World Health Organization to ensure that everything that they were planning in advance falls into place, right? And so my guess is I believe that he's going to come, and that it's just going to bolster the talks that they're going to have at this UN conference. And so, again, this is significant that the Pope is going to be addressing the United Nations potentially in September.
Let's roll it. Pope Francis may visit the US in September after UN invitation. And if you notice, if he comes, he says he'll be speaking at the Summit of the Future. Here's a clip.
For now, he has no intention of slowing down.
And I know you have some big trips planned.
I have one now to the Far East, then Belgium, maybe the United States, depending on whether I have to go and speak at the United Nations, but it is not certain.
You may go to the United Nations?
It's a possibility. I'm not certain.
What do you want to talk about?
If I go, it is to talk about peace. If the opportunity arises, I would be willing to go.
Marie.
So, a couple of points that we want to mention there. He's using the same language that Antonio Gutierrez is using, right? He says the purpose of this summit is to establish peace. So do we see how they're all on the same page? And what is Gutierrez saying is going to essentially help them to establish peace is a new global order, a new financial system. And so there was something else I just wanted to also highlight from the previous article that you just showed. He actually mentioned there's 2 points in the previous article. This article actually comes from the Catholic News Agency. And what they said there is that they are also looking to establish global governance. And there's another portion in there where the Pope himself has said that this event is important, and that he's looking for them to establish concrete processes and actions, during the summit. And so again, I just want to reiterate the fact that this event is significant, and the fact that both Antonio Gutierrez, who you rightly said is Jesuit trained, and the Pope, they're using the same language, and of course, to establish peace.
If I could shout, I would shout. I'm going to bring the audience, listeners, back to Matthew 4. I'm not sure we got it. When Satan said to Christ, "Look at the kingdoms," plural, "and the glory of them. All these things will I give unto you if you fall down and worship me." If there was one kingdom that was not linked to Satan, then that means there would have been an out. Don't bow, just go to this other kingdom. That means Satan must control all the kingdoms. And what is the UN about to do? Unite all the nations, the WHO, link all the nations to sign on. And then will come the conditions. If you do not worship, you can't buy or sell. That's so clear. And here is the Pope now going to the UN in September. And what did he make mention of, I believe, in 2023 about his accession to the UN? Say more about that.
That is troubling, to say the least. And for those of us that really don't understand what that means, for 54 years, the Pope has been a permanent observer to the UN, right? And so what that really means in layman's terms is that they were just there to kind of observe what was going on. They actually weren't taking part in the discussions or the deliberations there. However, as of recently, the Pope has, as you rightly mentioned, he's made this extension, right? Which means now he's playing an active role in the UN. And so this also adds another layer, because this is going to be the first UN meeting in which the Pope is coming under this new position. And so are we kind of seeing how this is significant, prophetic, and how this has great significance to what is going to take place both at the summit as well as for those of us that are Christians?
And as it says, the Pope is no longer just an observer now. The Vatican looks to wield new status in the UN climate talks. And if you notice, they're on the same team, Pope Francis and Antonio Gutierrez. And of course, that word accession, talk to us about that, accession.
Well, I mean, the literal term accession means an attainment or acquisition of a position or rank of power, typically that of a monarch. And there it says the Queen's accession to the throne. Lord have mercy, right? And so isn't this fitting that the Vatican would use this particular terminology, right? Because Revelations tells us I am a queen and am no widow, right? And so, and the fact that she's ascending to her throne, that should send chills, down the spines of us who know Bible prophecy and what it means. And isn't this what's actually taking place here? You have all of the nations gathering, they're signing a treaty, and again yielding their power and their strength to the beast. And I think again it's significant because the Pope has changed her status, and so she's ready to take the helm of the ship. And so I hope we really are taking this seriously.
And in addition, some people say, I don't believe the book Great Controversy is actually inspired. Yet what has been written is now being fulfilled. In the book Great Controversy, page 55, look at the word actually used. The accession of the Roman Church to power marked the beginning of the Dark Ages. Beloved, so when did the Pope say his church, the Vatican, has now made it their duty, their accession to the UN? What was that date? October 4th, 2022. And we're told in the past, that was the beginning of the Dark Ages. History does repeat, and faith was transferred from Christ to the Pope of Rome. And everybody now is looking to the Pope to solve world problems. Is that not a repetition of history? Then it says a deviation from papal requirements was sufficient cause for the severest punishment to be visited upon the bodies and souls of the offenders. So what is about to ensue? As we now see, the papal accession to the UN, Paris Climate Agreement, and also to the United Nations. Now, Marie, what's on your radar? Why is the Pope actually trying to reform the UN?
Okay.
Why does the UN need change?
Well, she's
Altering.
already
Why?
Pastor, she's already told us why she wants the UN to be reformed, and that's because she wants to give the UN real teeth. And I'm not saying this. This is what she has said verbatim. And we know that the papacy doesn't have her own standing army, right? And she is a church, right? And so Bible prophecy tells us that the papal church is going to be married to the kings, the nations, right? And so this is just a union of church and state. And the fact that she also mentions the fact that the UN needs this reform, and she uses language, real teeth, reminds me of Daniel chapter 7, right? Where the Bible talks about how the Roman power, the beast, right, has iron teeth. And so we're seeing prophecy littered throughout all of this. And if you're paying attention to the things that we're seeing and we're hearing, you'll be able to put these pieces together, and you'll be able to rightly point out all of the events that are taking place today in our world.
So if we look at the screen here, it says, so that, the Pope speaking, the concept of the family of nations can acquire real teeth. Now, this was written in the Pope's encyclical called Fratelli Tutti, which actually means encyclical, the highest authoritative document in the Vatican, the Holy See, the Roman Catholic Church. You mentioned Daniel 7, verse 7, how the Roman Empire had great iron teeth, and which power then arose in verse 8, Marie?
It was the papal power. It was the papacy.
That's it. So we're seeing a repetition now. This is why the Pope is leading this charge to reform the UN. Roman Empire, a conglomerate of nations. United Nations, a conglomerate of nations. They are impotent, he said. They're weak, he said. They need real iron teeth. Yes. Marie.
I just want to also mention, the fact that Antonio Gutierrez is using the language of the Pope. He says that the UN needs to be reformed. Where did he get that from? What's wrong with the UN the way that it is? And it's because he's carrying out the marching orders of the papacy. I just wanted to add that point.
And there it is in Fratelli Tutti. So if people are listening and watching, go back and look at Daniel 7, verse 7 and verse 8, and look at verse 20 through verse 22, and look at verse 25. Whenever that little horn, that will grow stout, the papacy, it will make war against God's people, think to change times and laws. God's times and laws, what in God's laws, 10 commandments, has a directive about time, the fourth commandment. So we can see what's coming. And verse 20 through verse 22, this war continues until the second coming of Jesus Christ. Wake up. Wake up. So Marie, the summit of the future coming in September 2024. Just elaborate and go into more details on what they're trying to combat by getting all these nations to sign onto this summit of the future.
Right. So the purpose of the pact is so that, and according to this article here, they're saying that the pact will be negotiated and endorsed by countries in the lead up and during this summit. Now here, this is verbatim, their own words. They said the result.
It's going to be negotiated and endorsed by countries. How do you endorse something? You
buy it?
Thank you, Elder Buchanan. You got to sign it. And what was leading up to August 11, 1840? Turkey had to sign that pact. We are surrendering our sovereignty to the powers of the West, the Christian nations. And that was the spark that led to the rapid movement from 1840 to 1844. And we're now seeing nations endorsing this pact. Where are God's people's vigilance? Marie, pardon me.
Sure, not a problem. And, they also said that the results of this summit will be the world that there will be an international system that will better be able to deal with conflicts, or as they call it, global shocks. And this is startling. I believe that you have a picture of what some of those global shocks are. And so, again, just to reiterate the points that were previously mentioned, is that they're establishing this order so that any issue that the world is facing, whether it's health related or it's related to climate change, they'll be able to mobilize and it'll be a global response. Everyone will be on the same page. Doesn't that sound like a new world order to you? It sure sounds like it to me.
Let me itemize all 7 from left to right. Major climatic event, future pandemic risks, event involving biological agents, disruption to global flows of goods or people, cyberspace/global digital connectivity disruption. Number 6, major event in outer space. Wait a minute now. That one seems to be the odd one, right?
Right.
Is that odd? It's not odd. And lastly, unforeseen Black Swan event. Marie, the baton is yours.
Well, they have everything covered, right? I mean, I don't think that anything can happen on a global scale that they won't then empower themselves to be able to address. In the same way that they responded during the pandemic, they can use the same draconian powers to be able to say, hey, this is something that is going to affect everyone, and all nations are on the same page, and we need to respond to it in this fashion, regardless to what you feel is or isn't fair, or if it goes against your human rights. All of these things. And so this is startling. This is scary to think of the power that these nations are going to yield, not only to the UN, but essentially and eventually to the papacy herself.
Now, we need to spell this out. Elder, let me get that screen one more time. It says here, most of these we have already encountered. Major climatic event, pandemic, biological warfare, the disruption to the supply chain, we all went through that. Cyber attack, we have seen that. But the last two, I want to focus on quickly. Major event in outer space. That could mean two of several things. Number one, that could simply mean the superpowers using nuclear and their satellites outer space, right? What about the so-called alien invasion? Because remember, it was from a president who actually said, one thing that will unite us is an alien invasion that will unite all of us. On the media, the aliens are coming to get us. What now, preacher? Nixon said that. Nixon? Or was it
Reagan?
Herbert Bush. The aliens are coming. The movies are speaking about aliens. The media recently are talking about alien sightings in people's backyards, where people shop. Yes. So we can see how they're laying the foundation. First of all, let's get all nations to sign the pact, sign the agreement, and then we manufacture the crisis. Then we can roll out the draconian policies, and we have control over all nations, all individuals, and we can enslave them mentally and spiritually, financially, socially. They have us surrounded, and not to mention Black Swan. What about America? Here he is, Gutierrez.
Looking ahead at the Summit of the Future in September, we have a chance to shape multilateralism for years to come. And indeed, our world badly needs reform of the Security Council, reform of the international financial system, the meaningful engagement of youth in decision-making, a global digital compact to maximize the benefits of new technologies and minimize the risks, an emergency platform to improve the international response to complex global shocks. And I see a truly dynamic effort to build a more effective, inclusive, and renewed multilateralism turned to the 21st century and our increasingly multipolar world. And you are at the heart of this essential effort, and peace is at the heart of all we do.
When they shall say peace and safety, sudden destruction. So the point here is the global shocks are coming so we can get the agenda implemented. Before you go, Marie, let me just qualify something here. It was not Nixon. I believe it was not Herbert Bush, but it was Reagan who said that. Expect invasion of aliens that will bring us together. Marie.
You know, and Pastor, you failed to mention Project Bluebeam, right? You've been covering that recently. HARP, all of these things. Do you see how everything's converging? You know, they're preparing us. And if you're paying attention to all of these points, if you're able to piece them together through the double lenses, you know, the Bible and the spirit of prophecy, you'll be able to identify the ploys of the adversary. Now, one of the points that I wanted to mention from the video that you just played is that Antonio made mention of the Global Digital Compact. And now, according to their own articles, they said that this is to bring governments together. And of course, it says digital, right? And so this is going to be a global approach to digital governance, right? So we've already talked about CBDCs and how, you know, with this new economic order that everything's going to go into a digital system, but that's not it. I mean, everything's going to be digitalized, right? So we can think of, you know, our digital IDs. We can think of vaccine passports. You name it, everything is going to be on a digital system. Catherine Fitz talked about how, we're going into a digital prison. And so these are just some of the things that they're going to be doing with this compact. And also it says that this compact will be able to provide a framework that will align national and regional and industrial approaches around global priorities. Now, when we're talking about global priorities, that removes the idea of an individual's priority, right? It trumps
Yes.
the individual's priorities.
Global priorities, common good.
Yes. Absolutely, right. And so again, you see that this has the Vatican's fingerprints all over it. And also it says it proposes a respective apex body to oversee the entire system. Now that is startling, to say the least. And so what they're saying is that there's this mysterious shadow government, that's going to be overseeing this new system that they're going to establish. The question is, who is going to be overseeing the system? And we know who, based on Bible prophecy, that it's going to be the Vatican.
And here it is, this apex body. And the actual digital ID will be linked to your bank account. That's what he was talking about. And that's number one of the SDG, the Sustainable Development Goals. And here is the apex. What does apex mean? It means summit, peak, summit. Summit means apex. These are synonyms. The Tower of Babel, apex. Like a triangle in geometry. At the back of the $1 bill, you have the apex right there in front of you. It's right there. The all-seeing eye, the so-called Holy See. That's the apex. That's the apex body, popery. It's right there in plain sight. Control the economy. And then comes Novus Ordo Seclorum, the new order of the ages. And that's what they're calling for. Your closing words, Marie.
Well, in order for us to, sum up just everything that's taking place,
because some
the UN
people might not get everything.
Right. I think it's important for us to just really look at the fact that this is essentially a power grab, and they're bringing all of the nations together, as they rightly said. And we're just reiterating these points, because repetition deepens the impression. They're establishing a new economic order. They're establishing a new global order. The papacy is coming. The Pope is coming to address the UN. They're saying all this is being done for peace, right? And the Bible says that the Pope is the man of peace. And so I hope that through this presentation, we're able to see how the dots are being connected, and that we are in the very precipice, the very, end of Bible prophecy. I think of Daniel chapter 2, the very toes of, Bible prophecy. And so, brothers and sisters, I know that some of the information that was presented today may be unsettling, but, the Bible tells us that God has not given us a spirit of fear. And so Jesus made mention to Judas. He said, what thou doest, do quickly. And so I say the same thing to each and every one of us. What we're going to do, we need to do now. We need to pray and ask God to open up the doors. We're at the Red Sea. And I know for you, as it is for me, we hear the rumblings of Pharaoh's army, right? And sometimes we become anxious and we're like, Lord, open up the Red Sea. God is, everything that he does is on time. So be patient, wait on the Lord, and do everything in your power to prepare yourself for what is coming. Because as Sister White says, the final movements will be rapid ones.
Before I let you out of here, there's a missing link. Where does America play in all of this?
Well,
because we know the mark of the beast begins right here in America. I'm looking at an article here that says the UN is planning to seize global emergency powers with Biden's support. And if this document is signed by the US, it says, if approved, the United States as we know it could cease to exist. Marie, closing words.
Right. Yes. And as you rightly stated, we know that based on Bible prophecy, that it's the United States, apostate Protestantism. I can't speak today.
Protestantism.
Thank you. That is going to force the nations to worship the beast, right? And going back to what you originally said, right? If all of the nations are united in their efforts, and the United States says, we're experiencing all of these catastrophes and, calamities, and we need to worship on Sunday, paying homage to the beast, everyone is going to be on the same page and they're going to follow the lead of the United States. And again, this just re-emphasizes Bible prophecy. And I hope that we get that.
I want to close by saying, over and over again, Gutierrez said, it's time to reform the UN, reform the economic structure, reform the political structure, reform how we deal with and combat climate crises, reform the system so we can deal with pandemics and pestilences. All about reform, reform. Stay with me here. And this reform is based on the papal power, Reformation. They are gung-ho, aggressively reforming their system to give the power back to popery. It's just as what we're told in the book Great Controversy, that there is coming a revival of popery. Did you catch it? Those great two words, revival and reformation. I wonder if you caught that. Let's reform the nations and give the powers back to popery, to the papacy. When they do this, it's going to be a revival of popery. She would have regained her lost dominion, regained the power of America, just as inspiration says that they will trample upon liberty of conscience in America and around the world. Beloved, I hope these words were as nails in sure places in your hearts. Seek God right now for revival and reformation. What thou doest, as Marie said, Christ said to Judas in John 13, do quickly, quickly. Implement those 5 keys. And while you're doing your best, be patient. Be patient. God's will knows no haste nor delay. The desire of ages, page 32. It knows no haste. It knows no delay. Just be patient. You get right, revival and reformation, and in God's timing, He will get you to implement the other 4 keys of survival. What stood out to you today? Let me get those comments in the comment section. Again, subscribe to God's platform here. Give the video a thumbs up and share this with other people so we can get others ready before it is too late. I want to thank Marie Diaz for joining us for this midday power surge. And by God's grace, everybody, I will see you tomorrow at 12 noon Eastern for midday power surge. Father in heaven, we're thankful for what was covered today. You have not given to us the spirit of fear, but of love, power, and a sound mind. May we claim the words, faith in the ability of Christ to save us amply, fully, entirely, in His way, in His time, is the faith of Jesus. We thank you for hearing. We thank you for answering. In the name of Jesus Christ, amen. Friends, Maranatha, the Lord is soon to come, and may we all have this motto, death before dishonoring Christ. God bless.